Got something kind of neat here. This is a Pentax K1000 35mm film camera. This belongs to Chris. There's nothing wrong with it. He just let me borrow it to check it out and make a quick little video on it if I wanted to. These are really neat. If you took a photography class in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, or possibly the 2000s, you probably used one of these. This became the standard training camera for decades. Pentax made this camera from 1976 to 1997. So they made this for a long time. And it became the standard training camera because it's completely manual. Totally manual operation. Manual focus, manual film wind, and manual light metering. The only things you have to help you out is that there is an electronic light meter, a little gauge in the viewfinder that lets you know if your aperture and shutter are appropriately set to get a good exposure. And I'll show you that if I can, if we can get a look through the viewfinder. And kind of a neat feature of these, and other manual 35mm cameras had stuff like this too, there's a little special prism or something in the optical path to the viewfinder that tells you whether or not you're in focus. You can tell just looking through the lens whether or not you're in focus, but if you want to get it right on, there's a neat little I don't know how to explain it. I'll just have to show it to you, but it's a really neat little thing you can look at that shows you when you're exactly focused. So this is an early unit, and how you can tell that it's an early unit is it still has the Asahi name. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but Asahi was the company that had the Pentax brand. Later ones just said Pentax. And it's got this little AOCO oh, you know what? I know what that stands for. It stands for Asahi Optical Company. It's got a little logo ingrained in the pentaprism there. And later ones did not have that. The earliest ones were made in Japan. This is a Japanese-made one. Later in the 80s, I think, they changed to Hong Kong. And then I think around 1990 or so, they moved production again to China. And the Japanese ones are definitely the most coveted, because while the Japanese ones are made almost entirely of metal, the later Hong Kong and Chinese made ones, a lot of the body components changed to plastic, so the camera became a lot lighter, a lot more plasticky. So these early ones that are all metal construction are definitely the most coveted ones to get. And this feels, it's hard to explain how solid this feels. This thing is so heavy. And my friend Neil, who passed away in 2016, he had one of these. He had a K1000. And it was an early one like this. And he described it in a way that I've always remembered. He said that it's like they took a solid block of aluminum and carved a camera out of it. And that's really what it feels like. This thing feels so solid. Actually, I'm not sure it's aluminum. Something I read suggests that it's brass with a satin chrome finish on it. Really interesting. But yeah, it's just so heavy. It feels so substantial. Really neat. So this is an SLR camera, so you can take the lens off. And there were quite a few lenses made for what's called the K mount here, the Pentax K mount. This one is a Pentax 50mm, looks like an f2.0. So a pretty basic lens, possibly the lens that came with this, but you just push this little thing down. It's more of a two-handed job, but push it down, turn the lens, and it comes off. So there's your lens. Take a look at this lens, pretty neat lens. So there's your focus right here. And it indicates the range that you're focused at. And this ring sets your aperture from f2.0 to 22. Very cool. This lens has a UV filter on it to protect the lens. And you can actually see, if I turn the aperture ring there, You can see the aperture open and close. So I'm going to set that right there. So there's what the camera looks like. I will wind it here to prepare to take a picture. And I press the shutter button. And it's very quick, but you could see the mirror lift, and then the shutter opens, and then the shutter closes, and then the mirror drops back down. Here's where you set your shutter speed from 1 second to 1,000th of a second. And there's also a bulb mode, which means the shutter will stay open for as long as you hold the shutter button down. So I'll hold it down here. So there you go. And these manual cameras, they have an impressive amount of clockwork in them, just clockwork mechanisms to be able to time the shutter like that across all these different shutter settings. Like, I'll put it on the slowest setting here, 1 second, and I'll hit the button, and you can see all by itself it's able to time that for 1 second. And you can actually hear the clockwork mechanism going while the shutter's open. There's your exposure counter right there. That is how you set your ISO. It's currently set to 400. I'm not sure how you change it. I don't know if there's a little tool you stick in these two little things or what. And then this is your film rewinder. You pull this thing out and pull it up a little and then wind it. And then to open the film door, you pull it up more, and the door opens. And what neither I nor Chris knew was that this thing has a roll of film in it, and it was loaded, and it was only halfway through the exposures, and I didn't realize that until I had taken a bunch of pictures just playing with pretending to take pictures, and then all of a sudden I couldn't take pictures anymore, and it turns out I had exposed the rest of this film, and all I could do was just rewind it, and there it is, mystery film that Chris will have to get developed someday. A roll of Kodak Max 400. There's the shutter right there. It's this really delicate silk screen. So I'll wind it here. And turn the shutter down to something slower. So you see that? So let me put the lens back on. Line the red dot up with the red dot on the camera body. Click. And the lens is back on. So let me see if I can show you through. Oh, first of all, so I told you this thing does have one electronic feature on it, the light meter. It's got an electrically powered light meter. The battery for the light meter is right here. It takes a standard button cell battery. I put a new battery in it for Chris. Now let me see if I can get you a view through the viewfinder here. There! You can see to the right of the viewfinder, there's the light meter, and as I move the camera to lighter or darker things, it tells me whether the picture is going to be underexposed or overexposed at the current settings. Isn't that neat? So you're not totally on your own, having to determine what settings you should use. The camera does help you with that. And this meter does respond to different shutter and aperture settings. If I turn the shutter switch here, you can see the meter starts changing because I'm slowing down the shutter. Now I'm speeding up the shutter, and it's telling me that my shutter speed's too fast. Likewise, if I start turning the aperture ring here, you can see it responds to that. Now as for focusing, this might be hard for me to demonstrate, but I'm going to give it a try here. So you might be able to see, let me see. Okay, do you see right in the middle of the viewfinder, there's that little bubble there? Now look through the bubble and you can see that the leg of the table that I'm pointing the camera at, it's sort of like cut in two by this bubble and horizontally shifted. What you do is you turn the focus ring until the horizontal shifting is gone. You can see I'm turning, and it's starting to come together. And there, now the leg is lined up. So that tells me that I'm in focus. Isn't that neat? I never knew that cameras had this. Now I'm out of focus again. You can see the horizontal shifting starts to line up. And I'm in focus now. That's really, really neat. I had no idea. So these cameras have quite the following now. The people who have them and use them absolutely love them. There's a subculture of film photography of people who just exclusively use manual cameras. They just love the extra challenge of it. And you don't have any dumb electronics telling you what to do. You're all on your own except for that little focusing aid and the light meter. And people love that. And people love these cameras, and these cameras do take some really beautiful pictures when you've got the right lens on them. And there's a lot of lenses available for the Pentax K mount. And of course there's adapters you can get to mount lenses of other mounts onto a Pentax K mount body. But yeah, people really love these, and I can see why. What a substantial, well-built piece of equipment. And I can imagine really fun to use if a manual camera is what you're looking for. So this one came with a few accessories. This is something that you can put the camera in, and it's got the tripod mount at the bottom. And you can put it in this little leather holder. Or I don't know if it's leather or something else. But you screw this in. And there, that's just sort of a protective little case for the camera. The camera's also got two little clips here to put a shoulder strap, which this one also has. Not the original one, this one's for an Olympus camera. But you can see it's just got these little clips on it. Clip one there. And clip the other one like that. And now you've got a strap for it. And then this case joins up with the bottom part here to completely cover the camera when it's not in use. It's definitely a two-handed job to get this in there, so I'll cut off the camera and show that. And there's the camera fully protected in its case. And this little thing slots out, these buttons pull out, and then the camera's out, ready to use. So yeah, really neat piece of equipment. You can get these on the used market. You'll pay a little bit for them, a few $dozen for one of these in working condition. But they're a really cool manual camera. Very well built, very heavy, and just really nice feeling to use. And they take very good pictures. So I'll end this video by showing some extra stuff that came in the bag that the camera came in. Chris didn't know if the things in this bag worked with the Pentax or not. And it turns out they don't. But there's 3 lenses in here that are meant for Olympus cameras. They're based on the Olympus OM mount. So these aren't useful for the Pentax, at least not without an adapter. So he said that I could keep these lenses. And I really appreciate that. I'm going to at some point get a camera, probably a digital camera, and the appropriate adapter so that I can use these lenses, and I think that would be pretty cool. That would be my first DSLR camera. But this lens is it was made by a company called Focal, which was known for making really poor lenses, like really cheap budget lenses that didn't take very good pictures. But this one is 28mm f2.8, And it's kind of confusing because it says MC on it right there, which normally on a lens denotes that it's meant for the Minolta SR mount. But this isn't, so no clue why it says MC on there. But yeah, there's that. So presumably the original owner of this camera also had Olympus cameras, because you got the Olympus strap and then these Olympus lenses. Here's one that is a genuine Olympus lens. It's a Zuiko 50mm f1.8. So a nice basic lens. And then my favorite, this big chungus. It's a Vivitar zoom lens, 75 to 205mm f3.8. Wow, that is a chunky piece of glass. And unfortunately, it is a dirty piece of glass. It's got fungus growing inside it, which is too darn bad. I'll take this UV filter off it. And yeah, you can see it's got this, there, you can really see it. The lens is covered in it. It's not just those dots. It's all fogged up in there. Fungus, dang. You can open up these lenses. You can get a special tool for like 15 or 20 bucks. It looks like a compass that you'd use in high school to draw circles, but it fits in these little dimples on either side of the lens here. And then you turn it and it unscrews the lens and you can get the frontmost element out, which appears to be the one that's covered in fungus in this lens's case. And then you can clean the lens element and then screw it back together. So that's what I'll have to do. Once I get a camera that can use these lenses, I'll buy that tool so I can hopefully get this lens apart and clean that fungus off. But man, what a really cool lens. That's your focus barrel right here, and then your zoom barrel right here, and it appears to have a macro mode, which is cool. And there's your aperture setting. Really neat, really cool lens. Oh man, but too bad it's got that fungus going on. And then there's a couple of other things right here. This is a Olympus teleconverter made by Focal, 2x teleconverter. So you stick this on your camera and then you stick your lens on the other side and it doubles the focal length. So you put a 50mm lens on this, it becomes the equivalent of a 100mm lens. A 2x zoom, basically. So that's neat. That comes in this little case. And then finally, and I find this really interesting, the guy bought a Olympus mount to micro 4/3 adapter. This allows you to mount Olympus lenses on a micro 4/3 camera. Micro 4/3 is a digital camera standard. So evidently this guy was using these lenses on a digital camera, a micro 4/3 camera. So there it is. There's no optical components. It's just a physical mount. But that's really cool. Micro 4/3 cameras are made by Panasonic. The Panasonic Lumix DSLR cameras are micro 4/3. And I forget who else. I think Olympus might make some micro 4/3 cameras. But yeah, there's an adapter for that. So I am thinking, at some point, someday, I will get a micro 4/3 digital camera. And once I do that, I'm all set to use these lenses because I've already got the adapter. So I think that would be really cool. But yeah, just thought I'd tack this on to the end of the video. Some neat lenses that Chris is giving to me, which I really appreciate. So there you go, and there's a look at the Pentax K1000 camera.